Hey, how y'all doing? It's Chey, and you might notice I have a completely different background. That's because I may have some exciting news coming up in the future. Rollin'. I've had a very busy weekend, so far a very busy past 2 days, but I wanted to make a quick video for y'all wrapping up the other 2 books that I read this month, as well as a short little book haul. Most of the books that I read this month were Valentine's Day romance themed, and I wrapped them up in their own video, which I'll link in the cards. But I did read 2 other books, and they were so good they were 5-star reads for me, and that's why I want to tell y'all about them. The first book is Girl at War by Seger. Now, my partner, who is Croatian, is probably going to correct my pronunciation on that last name, but c'est la vie. This book takes place during the Balkan conflicts of the 90s. It follows a young girl in Zagreb, Croatia, experiencing the conflict as it breaks out, and the changes that happen to her life and her country, both slowly and more immediately. We follow her not only through childhood to see the toll that it has taken on her family, but also through adulthood after she's immigrated to the US and is now in college. She's in college when her childhood memories and old questions about who and what she left behind come back to haunt her. So we follow her as she goes back to Croatia to confront the past, find out some answers to her questions, and mostly just try to heal herself. It's very well done. It has beautiful prose. I think it was told beautifully from the eyes of a child, what a child notices, what a child prioritizes, but then it also made the transition to the adult perspective very well and very natural, especially that of a traumatized adult who had to grow up way too fast. It's funny, it's heart-wrenching all in one. It is very graphic at points, which it's about war, so I think you'd maybe expect that, but definitely check content warnings before you read this book. I think it's a very good read for anyone, but especially anyone who wants to read a story from a child's perspective about dealing with war, change, immigration, and all the toll that they can take on a child and how they grow up. The next 5-star read was The Music Shop by Rachel Joyce. Originally when I went to the library it was just to grab Girl at War, but then I saw this book on my way out. I saw the name and I saw the cover, and being as crazy about music as I am, of course I grabbed it too on my way out. This book follows the stories of shopkeepers on Unity Street, a tiny, not so nice neighborhood area of England in the late 1980s. Mainly, as the title suggests, it centers around the music shop and its owner, Frank. Frank has a knack of being able to listen to people, to talk to them and be able to hear music coming from them, like emanating from them like an aura, and then he's able to find them exactly what they need, even if it's not what they're originally looking for. The shopkeepers on Unity Street are a tiny community. There's some undertakers, there's a punk rock tattooist, there's a former priest. It's an eclectic little group, but they make it work. They're all very tight-knit and have a sort of steady rhythm of their small business community life. That is, until one day, a lady in a green coat shows up outside the record store, peering in the window, and she faints. She's a stranger to the community, no one recognizes her, and once she wakes up, she pretty much runs out without any explanation or any information. She just vanishes. This, of course, breaks up their small, steady, small business life, and they're all abuzz, being like, who is this woman? Where did she come from? Why did she faint? Is she okay? It's the most interesting thing that has happened in a very long time. And even more so, she immediately captivates Frank, because for the first time in his life, the only thing he hears from a person is silence. He doesn't hear any music coming from her, and that both worries and intrigues him. Life starts to swirl around this newcomer as she begins to appear more frequently in the area and at the music shop. Of course, the community is super interested in her, so every time she shows up, they're trying to ask her a bunch of questions, but she only gives them pieces of an answer, so she ends up leaving them more curious than the last time she left. As she's captivating the street, Frank begins to struggle with his own difficult past, the oncoming future of CDs he refuses to cater to, as well as his growing interest in this mysterious lady and why he just can't hear any music from her. This story is definitely one of my new favorites of all time. As a heavy vinyl enthusiast, and just a music lover in general, it was just a really beautiful story. The way Joyce interwove all the stories and the uniqueness of all the business owners, as well as their own individual struggles, back into the main narrative was wonderfully done. I thoroughly enjoyed every single character. Very fleshed out. It also takes place during a time period, the 80s in England, which is so musically interesting to me that I almost wrote my entire senior thesis about it until the pandemic hit. But Joyce captures the worries of progress in a way that is real and familiar to anyone who's grown up in a small town or an environment where tradition or sameness is very comfortable. The fear of the business owners losing their property and their livelihoods to this scary development company that's buying up all the empty places on the street, trying to turn them into apartments. The fear of going bankrupt due to chain stores, all of that. If you love music, if you love people, I highly recommend this book. Because if it does one thing the best, it's showing the magic that music truly works on individuals. Now those were the other 2 books that I read this month. I'm gonna do a quick haul for y'all of some books that I picked up at a discount store when I went shopping with my cousin. This is Burn the Place by Ileana Reagan. I don't know who this person is, but the back really intrigued me. It is a galvanizing debut memoir alive with startling energy that chronicles one chef's journey from foraging in the woods near her childhood home to running a Michelin-starred restaurant. I'm trying to get into reading more memoirs, and this sounded interesting right off the bat, as well as look at this beautiful cover. As someone who grew up on a farm myself, in the backwoods myself, I think this is going to be really inspiring. I'm really interested in learning more about the food world, about chefs, because it is a world that I know nothing about. Excited to get to this one. The next book is The Imaginary Corpse by Tyler Hayes. Why did I pick up this book? Honestly, I turned it over and the blurb on the back was the first thing I saw, and I have never read a blurb like this before. Blurbs don't usually interest me because opinions are so different, I don't really trust them, but I've never seen a blurb like this. A book as comforting and cathartic as your first knocked out tooth. What a blurb. I have never read a blurb like that in my life. How awesome is that? At that point, I didn't even really care about the synopsis. I was like, I'll just pick this up blind and read that for that kind of review. That's awesome. But let me read the back to you. In a world where Toy Story meets Sin City, a dinosaur detective battles his own trauma and a remorseless serial killer hell-bent on shaking up an already messed up town. I mean, even if there wasn't all that, you could honestly just put Dinosaur Detective on this book and I would have read it anyway. I hope this is great. The next book has a very short explanation. It's Who is Carmen Sandiego, but it's the fully, entirely Spanish edition. I started learning Spanish in high school when I had to take it as a class, but the way the teacher actually taught Spanish was by being useful. What I mean by that is we didn't do workbooks. He would put on weather reports and outline words for us to listen to and how they were used. He actually made us learn the language by using it, and so we would read books like this and pick out sentences and words and pay attention to different aspects of the language. And because of that, I still retain a ton of actually useful Spanish. And since it's such a common language, and since just knowing a different language is good for your brain, it's good for communicating, I want to continue to foster that learning and learn even more to become hopefully fluent one day. So this is my way of helping that. Next is 50 in Reverse. This is by Bill Flanagan. I don't know much about this book, but the cover intrigued me because it's clearly a tape reel, which the music freak in me, I'm very happy about that. But then the inside synopsis really hooked me. It's the spring of 1970, and Peter Wyatt has been suspended from 9th grade from stripping off his clothes in algebra class. Peter believes he is a 65-year-old man from the year 2020 who went to sleep in his home in New York and woke up in his childhood bedroom 50 years earlier. As 50 in Reverse proceeds, Peter struggles to fit in as a 15-year-old in 1970 while fighting to retain his sense of himself as a much older man. He's torn between his longing to get back to his family in 2020 and the temptation to remain in 1970. When his parents are alive, he knows 1,000 songs that haven't been written, and the girl who got away the first time is interested in him. I don't think I've ever read a sort of time-traveling book before. This will be a new one for me. Next is Mary H.K. Choi's Permanent Record. I read Yolk by Mary Choi, and I really enjoyed it. I haven't heard of this book, though, even though I think it was published before Yolk. What really captured me the first time I saw this was the dust jacket design, because here's the dust jacket, but then when you pull it off, isn't that gorgeous? It's so well designed. I love it. From what I can tell, it's a romance story that takes place between a more regular guy, a college dropout who works at a convenience store, grocery store, and a rising pop star. I really like her writing style. I liked Yolk. At first, it took me a while to vibe with it, but then I really enjoyed it. I really like the way she fleshes out her characters. At least I did in Yolk, so I hope that transfers over into this book. I don't know if you can tell, I'm a big character work person. Now, the last book in the haul is Death in Mudlick by Eric Eyre. Sorry, Eric, if I mispronounced that. It's a coal country fight against the drug companies that delivered the opioid epidemic. It's clearly nonfiction, but as someone who lives in the deep rural South where it has been ravaged by the opioid epidemic, very, very, very interested in this one. One of the last essays I actually wrote for college was about the intersection between classism, poverty, and drug abuse. It's a subject that hits really close to home. It's a subject that, especially if you're in the South, you're probably very familiar with if you're from a small town. Can't wait to get to that one. I think it's going to be heavy, so I'll probably take my time with it, but I hope it's good. Anyway, that's going to be it for me. Just wanted to tell y'all about those amazing books that I read and show y'all some new, hopefully equally as amazing books that I got. If you want to see more books, I have an entire books playlist for you to binge and check out to your heart's desire. And if you haven't heard it from anyone else today, I love you. Love and peace.